Alright, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Late Night Tips. Tonight we're going to look at Octatrack Workflow Part 3. And we are going to focus on building a song from scratch and the correct workflow, the most convenient workflow, at least for me, to build such a song. And also we're going to look at sample management, how to make sure you utilize all the potential of the Octatrack to make sure that you have room for all these samples that you want to use. So let's get to it. First of all, we need to clarify some of the nomenclature connected with the Octatrack, because for some people it might not be very clear on what different things mean in the manual. Okay, so we are in a project. It's in my template project, and we have banks, we have patterns, and we have parts. Three major building blocks to an Octatrack project. So banks are essentially songs for me. 16 banks, which means 16 songs within the project when I'm playing live. But the most fundamental building block, the smallest building block, is a pattern. And what a pattern is, and we need to be very clear on that, is just the selection of trigs together with all the parameter locks that you might experience in those trigs, including, for example, pitch. And the collection of trigs pertains to both samples and both the MIDI channels, but that's what it is. The samples, the settings of all the pages in here are not stored in a pattern. So a pattern is only a collection of trigs. But all the details, such as samples, settings on pages, and scenes, are stored in parts. And what parts are those settings that are assigned to a given pattern. So for example, I'm on pattern 1 in here, and part 1 is assigned to this pattern. When I go to pattern 2, part 2 is assigned to this, which means that, for example, in part 2, I can have a different sample loaded into track 1 on the Octatrack. So if you don't change a part and you change the sample, it's going to be changed in the previous pattern. So you have to be careful of that. Okay, so we have this little song in here. Let's listen to it. Okay, so I have the following samples in here in this project. I have 2 samples from the movie Existence. I have a collection of field recorded samples, different like house noises that I use as percussion. And I have a drum and bass track, and I also have this weird pad that we're going to be using later. Okay, so this pattern is done, and when I'm building, and let's say I want to expand on this pattern, add some other vocal samples to the next pattern. So what I do in such a situation is I copy this pattern and I paste it in here. By using this, I make sure that all the settings in here are saved and are consistent throughout the project. And let's say that in pattern 2, I want to use a different vocal sample. So instead of
she spends most of her time alone in a room designing the games.
Instead of this, I want to use this.
You've never played any game.
So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to load this to a slot because it's going to disappear in pattern 1, but I'm going to take advantage of parameter locks in here and go to track 1, arm it for recording, and press the trig and use the level knob to select a different sample. So now here's what it sounds like. Okay, so please note that all the settings in here, in those pages, from pattern 1 are retained. And if I change them in here, they are also going to be changed in pattern 1. So we have to be careful of that. But using the parameter lock, I can select any number of samples. So in here I can select a different sample, for example, a drum hit, if I want to. Sound like that. Okay, so that's the first technique for using multiple samples within one part. The second possible technique is using slices. So I have this weird sort of snare-like sound. But let's say that in pattern 2, I want to use a different sound. So you'll notice that this is actually a longer track that's just being sliced. So I have some kick, some snare, some clicky sound, some shot, different types of sounds in here. And if I want to change those sounds in here as samples, I can just use parameter locks inside the pattern to give me a different one, different sample, different slice. Yeah, and actually you can upload really long samples into the Octatrack. What this means is that you won't be able to do crazy stuff like this track. Because this is sliced up. But for basic samples like one shot and so on, this is a very feasible technique. It's an okay technique. So that's the second technique to manage your samples and import different samples to the same track. But the main technique for doing that is going to be just creating a part. And what I always do in here, again, I'm going to copy my pattern. I'm going to paste it on pattern 3. And if I want to, to pattern 3. And if I want to upload a new sample to track 1, I'm just going to copy part 1, paste it on part 2, and press enter to confirm. And right now part 2 is assigned to pattern 3. You can see that very clearly. Yes. And now by copying it, I make sure that all the sample settings are the same. All the scene settings are consistent in this song. But now I can easily go ahead and put a different sample in here. Let's say a pad. Something like that. And now it's out of tune. So now I can tune it, and you'll notice that it didn't affect the settings on pattern 2 because it's a different part. If it was the same part, I would have changed the settings on pattern 2. So that's very important. But you clearly see it's a different sample.
She spends most of the time.
And that's how powerful parts are. Another interesting thing about the part is this also means that I can change any other page settings, for example, for MIDI. So I have the LFO in here affecting the volume, and I can, for example, change this to be a little bit faster. So now I have a wobblier bass. And again, you see this is saved in a part. But I always make, so if I want to move on, I'm going to and create a new pattern with new samples. I'm going to probably copy one of those parts to another one and then assign to make sure that that this song remains consistent. Once the song is done, obviously, what I'm going to do, I'm going to review all the settings, all the volume levels, to see that they're consistent, all the effects. Sometimes I need to copy something. But for the songwriting process, copying is the easiest way. One of the biggest problems for me with the Octatrack is that when you're copying a pattern, you need to stop. So there should be a like duplicate button, like in Ableton, for example, so that you just duplicate your pattern to the next one, and it's selected in the next round so that you don't have to interrupt the flow. All right, so that's it. That's the songwriting workflow that I personally use. We have 3 techniques for uploading different samples. So using parameter locks and using the level knob to select, I think I forgot the name. It has a special name in the manual. We can use slices, or we can use parts to upload multiple samples into a given track. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this one. Hope it was helpful, very technical. And I'll see you next Monday. Make sure to subscribe to this channel for more tutorials and jams. Take care.